when we interview firms on our podcast and we get a little blurb from them, hey, I grew, sizable amount in 24 months. I got to $1 million in 24 months. I got to $1 million in 12 months. I got to $3 million in a couple of years. I mean, it's just like these numbers are kind of unbelievable in terms of how fast they're growing. And 100% of the time, they are a cloud firm. They are a cloud firm 100% of the time.
Hi, I'm Brannon Poe, founder of Poe Group Advisors and creator of the Accounting Practice Academy. You are listening to the Accountant's Flight Plan podcast, where we talk about stuff in the accounting world. If you're looking to buy or sell a practice, we are the premier accounting practice intermediary firm in the industry. Check us out at pogroupadvisors.com. If you're a firm owner looking to build a more profitable practice while actually reducing owner hours, sign up for our practice management workshop, which only runs a few times per year. Learn more at accountingpracticeacademy.com. Thanks for joining us today on Accountant's Flight Plan podcast. I've got a repeat guest today, David Cristello, who is the founder of Jetpack Workflow. And I'm excited about today because our last podcast, I was very impressed with just how good you are in front of the microphone, David. And you never run out of things to talk about, which is exciting for a podcast, right? So, well, I know it's probably been a couple of years since you were on before, and we've had a little thing called COVID-19's happened since then. How did that impact Jetpack Workflow?
Yeah. Well, first off, thanks for the kind words. I like questions. I like to be curious. I think the best things in life often start from being a little curious and exploring a little bit. And so it's a real treat to have you on the show, and I appreciate the offer to be on yours. Yeah, I mean, from a software perspective, 2020, and I won't touch on it too long. I want to dig into the accountant's perspective as well. But it was very strange for us, because when we looked at the cascading potential dominoes for 2020, it could have really negatively impacted accounting firms, which would obviously then very negatively impact our business. This is who we serve each and every day. We don't look at other professional services. We think about accounting, bookkeeping, payroll, and tax firms. And essentially, at least in some regards, the state of their health is dependent on the health of the SMBs, like in the US and even abroad. And so, when we saw the shutdowns and we saw the closures, we initially saw, a handful of firms, immediately start cutting back on technology. They started, canceling. They said our clients won't need our services. They're not open. What are we going to do for them? And then 2 weeks later, it said, well, actually, we do need your services because this new thing called PPP came out, and there's new SBA opportunities and, things like that. And so all of a sudden, there was just a rush of activity of everybody, from an accounting perspective, just trying to tread water with all the work that was going on, plus trying to navigate, being fully remote if they were not used to that, plus trying to manage the just personal shift. You might have had kids at home. You might have been used to traveling. Heck, you might have been used to just going outside, which was, the first, 60 days, 90 days of COVID, you weren't even going to a store, which or really driving in most cases. And so you're really isolated. Your kids are home, which is great, but they also are a lot, and you can't have the same focus at work. And so work to the client, you have more small business owners asking you for things. There's a lot of urgency with PPP. If everybody remembers, it was going out every week. They said, hey, we have more applications. Oops, it's gone. More applications. Oops, it's gone. So it was a real roller coaster of a year, even from our perspective, where software is a little bit less impacted overall, depending on the industry you serve. But I would say from the accountants community, they were kind of busier than ever before, which is not where we thought we would be in March. We thought, oh my gosh, I wonder, if all these small businesses go under, what are we going to do? And so we saw, really, it's just treading water, because tax season was obviously deferred until July. And then you had extension season. And then I can't quantify how this played a role. I just know things were slower and weirder and different. The election season came, and the 24/7 cycle was on. I mean, it was just a really, odd year, right? I mean, that's put it mildly. But I think the accounting community really did a amazing job of how to of navigating new services to offer, essentially. Now, whether they charge for them or not is a different thing, but they were essentially being pulled into the advisory relationship because of PPP, because of the EIDL activity that was going on. And I think we're still at the beginning of understanding how that's going to unfold over the next couple of years of kind of moving into a remote advisory economy.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is the remote challenge. And I would expect that your software became more important to help coordinate remote teams. Did you see that helping? Was that something that was very helpful for people who are just going remote for the first time? If they've already implemented Jetpack, was it, did you get a lot of feedback from them going, wow, this is making remote work a little more easy and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. If you already have a centralized place to document all of your recurring client work and even your one-off client work, making the shift, you have one less thing to change.
Yeah.
Right? If you knew that you had a tool, in this case, Jetpack Workflow, that's where all the work is documented. That's where we know we're going to meet our obligations to our clients and make sure we get that work done on time. That was one less thing to change because you had to change so many other things. You had to change, even other tooling, right? So all of a sudden, if you are trying to cater to parents that had kids at home, you might not have been able to run the same meetings at the same time in the same way. And so all of a sudden you move to a written culture, an asynchronous culture, where you might have been used to either in office live or on Zoom live. And so that was and still is a really sizable change. We went through that change ourselves and we're still going through this change, which is when you go to remote, the benefit is flexibility, which we know that the economy and the employment is really fluid right now. So flexibility is at a premium, hiring remote works is at a premium, but your communication structure all of a sudden has to change, where written communication becomes more valuable in some cases than just a pure meeting delivery mechanism. So that's a really big change. And so folks that were trying to do that and trying to adopt cloud technology like Jetpack Workflow really had a challenging just time overall from a work-life balance.
Yeah.
And that's where, we certainly saw a kind of burnout. So the folks that were a little bit ahead of having the tooling set up, I think it helped out tremendously with the transition.
Yeah. One thing we implemented, I'll just share this, is we've always had a semi-remote team. So some of our team members have always worked remotely, and we have a Charleston-based team that works in an office. And so when it first hit, we had to go home and work. And the one thing I think that was the most helpful implementation we made was the daily huddle. Are you familiar with just, the 10-minute roundup? And we get on Zoom, and now that most of us are back in the office, we still do that daily huddle. And it's, we spend 10, 15, maybe 30 minutes some days if it runs over, but I try to keep it around 15 minutes. And it's just been a massive help to productivity because you know what people are working on, you know what their priorities are, you know what their struggles are, and the whole team can kind of help solve those problems. And that's been a big thing that we've seen. Did you see any changes in your software that sort of were stress tested, if you will, by this remote environment that you said, okay, we need to make some tweaks here or there?
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly, and it's a great point on the daily huddle. We certainly have seen that concept surface a lot. We're believers in it. We do functional daily huddles. So engineering team, sales, success, we'll do a huddle, to connect. And so I think the concept is really strong and really well proven out. We've seen a lot of firms adopt it and have nothing but good things to say about it. And you're exactly right. 10, 15, 20 minutes where, what did you do yesterday? What do you plan on doing today? And where are you stuck, if at all? In terms of the world of software, I think one of the bigger changes we made last year was integrating our platform into what is commonly characterized as kind of middleware software. And I'll unpack that because it's more software lingo than it is like normal people speak. So
yeah, I don't know what it is.
Yeah, and so it's essentially we integrated with a platform called Zapier And the reason we call it middleware is because it just primarily acts as a bridge between other applications, right? So in and of itself, you're not going to just use a tool called Zapier just to live inside of it. You're going to use it to connect different software to each other. And so there's over 3,000 applications that now connect into Zapier that allows you to create essentially custom integrations for whatever use case you need for your firm. And so a common example might be, so we hear this one a lot, so client onboarding. A new client comes in, I need certain information from them, and I need them to be added to 6 different platforms, if you will.
Like Gusto, I'm going to do Gusto for payroll. I'm going to do this for whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I want Gusto. I want them in a share file. I want them added to my tax and accounting platform. I want them added in whatever other database I want them in MailChimp or Marketo or HubSpot. And so what Zapier allows you to do is do something like, create when somebody fills out a Google form or a Jot form or a type form, they have dozens of forms they support in Microsoft as well. When somebody submits a form, add them as a client or contact in these 7 places, right? With all the information populated. Right. So in the past, you would have to almost hire a custom developer to do those integrations. I want Google Form to talk with Jetpack Workflow, and I also want it to talk with Gusto, and I also want it to talk with this. Well, now, seemingly, many niche integration use cases are possible through something like Zapier. So somebody could submit a form, it goes into those 6 different places, and something like that. We had a firm owner report that on average, it used to take them when they could do it start to finish, which nearly never happened, it would take them about 30 to 45 minutes just to get all the information through all the tools they use. Now they send out a link to the client fills out the form, all that information goes in the database. They don't have to worry about it. It's in the client's lap to fill out, and all the information is updated. So it's a better client experience, and it saves them a lot of time. One more example with Zapier, just to open up the use case potential. A lot of folks in our community, a lot of accounting, bookkeeping, payroll, tax firms are big fans of these kind of proposal softwares. There's Practice Ignition, there's Proposify, there's 6 other ones. I mean, somebody listening might be, but my favorite's this, right? There's a lot of them out there, and they don't always talk to industry platforms like Jetpack Workflow. And so, for example, if you're using Practice Ignition, and when somebody signs a proposal, if you want them to be added into Jetpack Workflow and have an onboarding job, or there's also called a project, kicked off in our system, you can do that. And if you're like, I don't want to use Practice Ignition, I love Proposify or Proposable or whatever. Well, those are probably in Zapier, so you could just say when they sign it in Proposify, create as a client in Jetpack, start the onboarding job, right? And so all of a sudden, all these silos of tools now have a way of talking with one another through something like a middleware platform like Zapier. And the reason this is useful, obviously, in COVID and remote, I think technology and our technology suite is going to go into one of 2 lanes. You're either going to go into the jack of all trades, master of none suite, which I think we've all seen the benefits as well as the negatives of that, right? So you get everything, but it doesn't really quite work. Nobody really quite likes it, but it's at least everything. And that's kind of one path. Then the other path is, I really love these 3 tools for these 3 separate reasons, and I want them to all talk to one another, but they won't build this custom integration I want. Well, now if they plug into Zapier, you can make this happen. So I think the nice thing here is technology and automation within a firm is going to increase, and seemingly the more we see folks integrate with Zapier or tools like it, you will at least be able to have a channel or a lane to create custom integrations to drive efficiencies in your firm and still use the best of breed technologies. So anyway, so that was a big thing from last year.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about with like the big all-in-one platforms being, kind of not great in any one space. And now is Zapier, are they focused in the accounting industry, or are they in all sorts of different places?
They're all over the board. So they are very industry agnostic, and that's what's enabled them to have 3,000 plus applications. So if you're using a MailChimp or a HubSpot or an Aweber for your marketing newsletter, if you're using seemingly any CRM, if you're using any marketing automation platform. I mean, the top 20 in pretty much any category is now listed on Zapier. I will say though, the downside of them not being focused on maybe the accounting and tax is that there are folks that really want to create a better set of automations with their tax platform, but in many ways, or most cases, they're still desktop. So I would expect to see someone in the next 24 months create a Zapier for the accounting industry, where they create really tight APIs and integrations for tax platforms. So a company like Jetpack can integrate with them, and all of a sudden we can now interface with every major tax platform, for example, in the marketplace. I think that's going to come up in the next 24 months. We'll see. But I've heard chatter in the ecosystem from various firms that they are interested in it. They're trying to work on it. Tough problem. So I do think it's going to come out. I just haven't seen it here today.
Yeah. I think Xero does a good job integrating with just about everything. Are you having any, do you have any experience with Xero Firms at all? Or very much? I know they're kind of creeping up in the marketplace, especially in Canada. They're experiencing pretty fast growth, especially on the west coast of Canada. And
yeah.
I think they're going to be making a big splash in the U.S.
Yeah, I mean, the good and bad news for Xero is, the good news is they're not going anywhere. The people that use the Xero platform are really bought in, and they've created and spent a lot of time, I feel like, on their community to try and have a different tonality and emotionality than Intuit. And I think that's really resonated with a set of firms. They've also spent a lot of time. We don't currently today directly integrate with Xero, although it's quite an interesting concept. But they spent a lot of time thinking about their integration community. And I do believe that they have. My dad is about 18 months old or so. So somebody in Intuit might get upset, me saying this, and we can update it if so in the show notes. They had more integrations than Intuit in their app ecosystem because they wanted to have as big of a community as possible. Now, obviously, Intuit did not really enjoy the Xero community landing in the U.S. Raising some capital. I think it was about $100 million right before they came into the U.S. Planted an office. I think it was San Francisco at the time. I think they're in Denver now. And really said, we're going to take over the accounting platform globally. And we've landed here in the U.S. And Intuit seemed to say, great, that's amazing. I love your $100 million. Here's our $4 billion. We're not going anywhere.
We're not going anywhere. So stepped up the competition, stepped them up.
Yeah, which I think is really great for the accounting community when you have a Xero and you have a QuickBooks. And so, and Intuit's now created a stronger presence in Australia as a counterattack. They're making a bigger footprint in South Africa as a counterattack, in Canada, UK. I mean, they've always been there, but they stepped it up because, they really, I think, felt some level of competition from Xero. And so anyways, it's a really great platform. I don't think it's going anywhere. People seem to be a really big fan of it. They've definitely driven some kind of interesting innovations with their platform. I think the acquisition of HubDoc was really smart on their end. It's a tool that accounting firms on both the Intuit, QBO, and Xero side of the aisle really love to auto pull in their bank statements and client information. I think Intuit's now released their own homegrown version of that. So I think net, it's really great for accounting firms. We saw a big splash 5 years ago. I remember talking with accounting firms, and Xero, everybody was talking about Xero, and Intuit really tried to take the oxygen out of the room. And I think to some degree they have. But again, Xero's not going anywhere. They're still here, and they're continuing to gain momentum, just less so than they were probably 5 years ago before they woke up the giant.
I think they're worth definitely keeping a strong eye on, because my understanding is in Australia, there was another platform that had about 90% of the market, and then Xero came in, and I think they flipped it. They have the lion's share of the market now.
Do you know who was that? Was that MYOB?
I want to say it was MYOB. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
I don't know anything about the platform. I just know that was what it was. So anyway, yeah, interesting stuff. And I think too, like we're seeing more and more cloud firms come on the market, and we've sold quite a few of them now, and it's great. I think this profession is going cloud faster than people realize. And unfortunately, a lot of firms are going to get caught if they don't make those changes, and not only caught, but just missing out on all the automation available. Do you have any comments on just where you see that transformation? Where is that transformation in your opinion? Are you seeing more and more firms automate, go cloud? Are you seeing that shift fast enough in your opinion, or do you think, what is your take on that?
Yeah, I don't think it's going fast enough in the majority of use cases. I will say that when we interview firms on our podcast and we get a little blurb from them, hey, I grew, sizable amount in 24 months. I got to $1 million in 24 months. I got to $1 million in 12 months. I got to $3 million in a couple of years. I mean, it's like these numbers are kind of unbelievable in terms of how fast they're growing. And 100% of the time, they are a cloud firm. They are a cloud firm 100% of the time. That's how they think. They think remote first. Even if they have a local office, like similar to your setup, even if they have something, hey, I'm in Boston, Massachusetts, our core team's here, we have some remote people, but it's how they, come into the market and how they decide to niche down and go after a certain industry or a certain, radius around their hometown, if you will. And I do think, for firms that haven't decided to probably allocate enough time to this change, and it's a big change, and it's a hard change, but I think if it's not something that necessarily excites you, and I'm curious now on your opinion this, I would say sell now. Sell your firm now, because your price is only going to be worse 3 years from now, 4 years from now, 5 years from now. Really think about selling now if you're kind of on the fence. That's kind of my sense, but I'd be curious to get your thoughts.
I think there's always going to be a place for the local firm. Like I don't think they're gonna completely get wiped out. I don't think that's
would you get
happen.
Would you get the best price this year?
Trying to predict this market, I've been in this since 2003, and sometimes the things that you think are going to impact the market impact it the opposite of what you think. I mean, COVID's a perfect example of that, right? Like, oh my gosh, this is going to wipe everybody out. No, it's not. It's going to make them busier. And there's, I can loop this back into this topic, I promise. But, there's all this work from home is never going away. People are never going back to the office. Commercial real estate is gonna tank. I don't think it's gonna happen that way. Like, I feel like people are gonna go and work from home for a while, and they're gonna go, gosh, I really want to go back to the office. And the reason I think that is because that was my experience. I worked from home for 5 years, I guess right after the financial crisis. So 2008, because we were kind of remote. And I was like, I'm going to economize here. I got a great space at the house. I'm just going to work from home until we want to grow again. And I liked it at first. It was kind of like you had all this freedom. You could go up and have a peanut butter sandwich at 2:00 if you wanted. And then all of a sudden, one day I was just like, man, I just can't do this anymore. I got to go back and be around people. And so that's what I did. And we've had an office now for a long time, and I'm not going back. Like, I like being in an office. And I think people are going to discover that. And I think too, there's always going to be people that want to be able to drop in and have a meeting face to face with their CPA, with their trusted advisor. So I do think the commodity work, like if you're in a commodity practice, that is going to be a problem. If you're in a rural area, selling is going to be a problem. Like we're seeing that now. Like it's sometimes these really small town practices are very difficult to sell. And I tell owners, like, you want to sell this firm, transform it to a cloud firm. Transform it to a cloud firm,
Exactly.
and then we can sell it. But I haven't seen anybody in the marketplace yet. And I had Ryan Lazanis on my podcast a month or so ago, and he consults with cloud firms to make them better and make them more profitable if they're already in the cloud. But he doesn't really help people transform from a traditional firm to a cloud firm. And I asked him, do you know anybody that's doing that and doing it well? And I don't. He doesn't. And I don't know anybody. I haven't run across anybody that's really doing a good job at helping firms transform. I don't think it's that complicated. I think it's more of just making the commitment and setting aside the time to make it happen. It's not that complicated. I mean, we've all switched software at some point. It's essentially a software switch, in my opinion. Now,
Yeah.
You got to get somebody from QuickBooks Desktop over to QBO or over to Xero or something like that. And it's a very tedious process because it's one client at a time. So,
Yeah.
but it's not that, to me, it's not that complicated. It's just tedious.
Yeah. I mean, I think you made a really good point. I think the mechanics and tactics of moving from one platform to another is not the most complicated thing for firm owners. I mean, these firm owners had to navigate and learn a lot more complexity than kind of moving between tools, almost regardless of where you are on the technology sophistication spectrum, if you will. I do think, though, to your point, it does require allocating non-trivial amounts of time to make it happen and to make the shift and to get your team on board and communicate it to the clients and move them one by one if you need to do that, and set up the disciplines to in our case manage the tool, set up the tool, open it up on your weekly syncs or whatever it may be, and take a look at the overdue list or what's up for the list, and just reinforce the usage of it. They're all rather simple. It doesn't make them easy to do. And so I think the big component is setting aside the time. Like, this is going to take, real thought to contextualize this for your firm. That's always the hardest part. And I do think consultants can help. I think implementers can help. But at the end of the day, as the firm owner, you're going to have to set aside hours of time to really think about how this translates well into your firm and how you would want to roll it out to the clients that you know better than anybody else. So I think it would be very time consuming.
Yeah. But there's so many advantages because the systems are so clean. And there's, once you get to those big platforms, like you're saying, there's so many other things that can be introduced that simplify your work.
Well, that and hiring, it opens up more optionality for hiring. So we have a podcast that'll be coming out over the next few months, and we're talking with a firm owner. She's based in Florida. She has 3 firms in Florida. Pre-pandemic, every time she posted an application, she would immediately get a couple dozen applicants, and she would find somebody relatively quickly. This was not a hard process for her to source talent. She put up a posting 2 months ago, maybe less than that. So post-tax season, so people could be looking, and she posted in her local area. And we're talking about Florida. This is not like there are 0 people that live in Florida. There's 0 accountants that live in Florida. There are people there. Okay, this is a great area, in terms of servicing businesses. And so, and she was left stranded. She just didn't get the applicants she used to get. She didn't get the quantity. She didn't get the quality. She couldn't hire in the state of Florida, but she really needed somebody. And so for the first time in her life, she opened up her applicant pool to a national search, and she found somebody, I think it was in the state of New York, that she was able to bring on. Self-servingly, she is a Jetpack Workflow customer, but the point being, if she was on a cloud platform, it opens up the opportunity for her to hire anywhere. So what could have been a kind of multi-quarter, like we can't hire, we're still going to try, we're not going to find anybody. Oh my gosh, we need to have a cloud platform. So if we hire somebody remotely, no. She was already there as a firm and as a firm owner. And so when she came against this challenge, it wasn't that hard for her to solve. And, you're talking about, challenges in selling. We're talking about challenges of something like COVID hitting, challenges in hiring. Being a little bit proactive in terms of your technology map makes all of these things so much easier to navigate if you just start today. Yesterday would have been great. Today's the next best option. So,
Yeah.
But I think there's a huge hiring component advantage to this.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that. And just the automations that are available, I feel like when you get on these platforms, you become much more nimble, as you said. And I think that applies to just the little simple things. If I can cut something down from 4 clicks to 1 click, or, all those little things that eat up your day, all of that can get more and more efficient.
Yeah,
Gusto,
these are. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say Gusto is a great example of that. We switched to Gusto payroll last year, and man, it integrates with. I use Xero. I've switched to Xero as well, and it's all integrated. All the postings happen. Like I do payroll, and it's done. It's already posted to my books, and I don't have to think about it.
Yeah, and they're only going to improve. I think. And so some of the, one of the biggest, I guess, trends that I'm excited about is, and some folks will say machine learning. Other people throw around the words AI. Most AI is just really machine learning or decision trees. It's not really AI, but anyways, but it's just smart software. It is software that can help you be more intelligent about your business without you having to dig through mountains of data. And I think every modern forward-thinking, innovative platform is thinking about how to kind of make their platform a bit smarter. And so there's not as much of a burden on the business owner or the individual to sort through report views, for example, or mountains of data to really get interesting insights about their business. And I think we're going to start seeing some pretty interesting kind of prediction layers inside of platforms, whether it's obviously cash flow, but I mean, for us, it could be around hiring, it could be around assessing or analyzing your best clients, it could be looking at the major bottlenecks and surfacing those to you as the firm owner. You kind of take the concept of the Google autofill, as you're writing your email. I'm sure Outlook has it too.
Yeah.
They say, oh, are you going for this phrase? Just hit tab, we'll finish the phrase. You're going to start seeing that level of technology over the next 3 to 4 or 5 years start to enter more of the Gusto platforms of the world, the more Xero platforms of the world, workflow platforms of the world. So I think, yeah, you're gaining a lot of advantages by getting into these tools.
Well, too, you talked about firm values being maybe not so much in the next 4 or 5 years. I kind of think I'm kind of becoming more and more bullish on the accounting industry, actually. Because
I didn't mean to interrupt you. I meant if you're local, and I didn't mention this point earlier, but I agree. If you're rural based, if you're local, if you're not cloud, and you don't want to make the switch, you're just I don't want to go there. I'm too tired. It's gonna be too tough. It's only going to get worse, I think, as we progress, because that's where the future is going. I think I agree. The value of accounting firms, the value not only of their impact to their SMBs, but the value of evaluation is never looked better, in my opinion.
I'm very bullish on the industry because I think this technology is going to put accountants where they should have been a long time ago, and that is able to not have so much time spent on the compliance piece and really get into the insight and the KPI management and just basically becoming a good coach for their business clients. It's not that hard. I mean, most accountants are quite capable of doing that. They're just so busy with all the stuff that is, but that stuff is getting easier and easier.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, if somebody's got and I've seen some firms that are dinosaurs, we've come across some that are, really old systems. And those aren't going to have a tremendous amount of value. But I feel like clients are going to be driving some of this change too. They're going to want more, and they're going to realize, well, hey, there's a niche. I've got a friend of mine who owns a tour company. Charleston's a big tourist area where we live, and he owns one of the biggest tour companies here. And he told me, he's like, I've got a bookkeeper that is out of state, but she only does tour companies.
Yeah.
And she's awesome because she knows my industry so well, and it's easy, and we work remotely. It's no big deal. So, I do see that. Now, if accountants lose enough clients to some of these specialty firms, that'll get their attention.
Yeah. I mean, I think the big thing here, even in relation to your work from home versus in office, it's just because of the acceleration we saw because of COVID, your optionality has increased. If you want to run a cloud firm and niche down, and you don't want to serve locally, you want to go national, it is easier and faster to do this before, and the SMB market is primed to have a virtual relationship with that type of firm. What that means is that competitor might be leaving your local area, which could free up space for you if you say, I want to be the local expert.
Mm-hmm.
You can do that. That is fine. And if you want to go to the office, that is fine. You might see a push towards the suburban market, right? People are leaving cities. They're like, wow, we really want more green space. We're locked up for a year. We want to go there. So firms that maybe didn't have as much foot traffic, that might increase. Now, firms that go entirely in office, you might struggle with hiring, or that might be a competitive advantage for people that don't want to work from home. So you might actually have some advantage for attracting talent if you provide a physical office. You can have both. You can have it all with this acceleration. You can find, looking at it from an employee perspective, you can find a local business, a local firm, and go work there if you want to. It's probably more enticing than it's ever been before. Put out your resume to a local firm and try to get a great job offer. And again, if you're a local firm, you say, you know what, I really enjoy this cloud world. And not only that, but I want to spend half the year being in some place that's not cold. Maybe I want to go to Charleston for half a year. That sounds nice. You now have that option, and the market is primed to give you that option. So I don't think you lose if you stay local and you stay in office. And I don't think you should be intimidated by the cloud firm and the level of competition out there, because I think it's a win-win scenario. Now, if you try to have both, I want to be local, I want to be great at this, I want to have office, but I kind of want to do a little remote thing, I want to do this. If you try to have too much at once, then you're going to, die from indigestion. Right?
Yeah.
There's a good saying that more businesses die from indigestion than starvation, right? So just be careful about where you go with this.
Yeah, you can lose your focus really fast if you're not careful.
Yeah.
And I see that happen to a lot of firms, and that's always been the case. Like, it's so easy to lose your focus because a client will say, well, I want this, I want that. And this client over here wants this. And before you know it, you're offering 30 different services and you're good at one of them or two of them.
Yeah. Look, there's a great firm, and we know them quite well, out in Springfield, Ohio. And to the best of my knowledge, they still have their office. I just saw they shot a video from it. So I'm assuming they still have it. They have always been passionate about Springfield, Ohio. They are like, I call the owner, he's kind of like the quasi mayor of Springfield, Ohio. He's passionate about that community. And post-COVID, they went back to the office. They're serving the community. They're out there, and that's where their heart is. And they're going to do just fine. But on the flip side, we have a firm owner out of Texas. She specialized in helping high net worth executives with tax planning. She has a remote team, I think, probably across the world at this point. She loves it. She loves working through nuanced tax planning issues. So part of this is really just understanding you have more options than ever before to really niche down into your passion area.
Yeah.
But just don't pick 7 passions.
Yeah.
Pick the one, right? Pick the one and go all in. And I think in the majority of cases, you'll do quite well. In the case where you might want to think about some nuances is where I think your approach to the rural firm that maybe is not cloud-based but wants to sell, then that is the kind of nuanced, thought process you have to think about. You're like, well, I love desktop software and I love, kind of my local clients, but I do want to sell. Well, you can't have both.
Yeah.
And so that's where you have to reflect.
Do you know of any consultants or companies that are helping accountants make the transition to cloud?
So there are a few consultants that, and I don't want to undersell or oversell their services. We obviously haven't hired them directly, but we've heard good things about them. There is one that I have referred, and she seems to be very knowledgeable on multiple different platforms. Her name is Heather Satterly. Maybe a good guess for your show. We've had her on a couple of times to talk about technology stacks and how to implement change and things like that. And so she's well versed in platforms like Zapier, so she could set up those integrations and those custom, they call them recipes for you, for onboarding, what have you. She knows not only Jetpack Workflow, but a lot of different project and client management tools. And I think she could probably do a good job of helping you build out a technology roadmap. There is another consultant or two, but I would have to send you the list. The one I think about the most would be Heather, and that's who I usually send people to for at least an initial kind of assessment to see how and when she can help.
Yeah, I know there's a really good tech consultant called Tech Guru, which is Daniel Moshe. We've had him on our podcast, and we've done some webinars with him. He's really good too. But he doesn't really focus on necessarily the transformation. He focuses on, hey, this is what we can help you with in terms of tech stack. And no, go ahead.
It's just something that came to mind is really thinking about, I'm not sure this is exactly where you're going, but who is the internal champion that's driving this change? And it doesn't have to be the firm owner. Now, if it's just you, good news, bad news, it's you, right? Like, or unless you hire somebody to do it. But you could hire a office manager. You could hire an admin that is well versed in adopting and implementing new pieces of technology. You could find this person part-time, full-time, hourly. That can happen if you don't have somebody in the admin capacity. This could be a really great time. It's one of the most impactful hires we've seen across the board. Any firm owner will make is that admin kind of office manager assistant hire. There's even a platform called, I think it's Great Assistant or Hire a Great Assistant that can help you vet and find a great one. And we're not affiliated with them in any way, shape, or form, but we've heard good things. Or you can take a look at your team and see who might be an internal champion for this change. And do they have the skills and knowledge to make this change? Now, they might be a bit junior, so you might be able to pair them up with Tech Guru or Heather or whoever, but this is the person that you want to allocate space to master this system, help drive the change and implementation of it, and really teach you how to use it and how it's integrated in the firm, and create the SOPs for the business and get the firm excited about this change. You can ordain somebody in your firm to be the internal champion. So use that to your advantage if you can.
I think that's a great idea because it is a tedious thing and it needs a constant effort. And you need somebody basically that knows how or is capable of managing change, because that's what this is. It's change management. Well, great. This has been, we could talk forever, but we probably should start wrapping up here. We've been at it for a while, and it's been a really interesting conversation. The tech is changing so fast; it's almost hard to keep up with. But gosh, every time I do some new stuff, it saves me time, and that's exciting, and it's saves me frustration too. So I love some of the tools that are available today. You read any good books lately?
Oh gosh, boy, have I read good books lately. Yeah, I it's a real passion of mine. I learned so much. It's probably, I think, one of the best investments you can make. Somebody spends decades, minimum years, learning something. So I'm going to give you all this information. It costs $20. So anyways, I love books. So I will say one of my favorite books I've read year to date. I actually have it right over here. Let me grab it. So this is probably a candidate to reread this book. It came out about 10 years ago. I think it's really applicable for the COVID transition. It's called Onward by Howard Schultz, by this little company he helped found called Starbucks. And he wrote this book when he came back as the CEO, essentially at the start of the financial crisis. And so Starbucks had gone through this stage of really great growth. They kind of grew faster than they could manage, I think, the quality control of the business. And Howard came back for 2 years or so, maybe a little bit longer. And what I really liked about this book is it's an operator that is writing a business book. So he really lays out the initiatives he put on the table to help transform the company, and then really talked about the practical examples of how those initiatives came to life. And he mentions things here that they tried to launch in 08, 09, 2010 that they had to cut. They thought it was going to help with the transformation, didn't work out. They tried a new drink, didn't work out. He put all the stock into it. He tried other things like the instant coffee Zia, in the instant coffee category. Very controversial at the company because they're all about, look, like we don't play with instant coffee. That's lowbrow. It's not high quality. We're about quality here at Starbucks. So he talked about the internal strife that was going on with that conversation. He talks about how they rolled it out. And so I just found this book to have a lot of very practical takeaways on change management and how he navigated that world. So while I don't think I'm in a position, you're in a position, most of the listeners in a position to throw a 30,000 person conference where we invite Bono onto the stage and have him play music, I think there's a lot of really, really applicable change management lessons, from this book. So I would say that is my number one recommendation. I'm happy to give you 4 more, but this is the one I'm saying, if you can grab one book this year, this has definitely been the top of my list so far.
That's nice. Yeah, I haven't even really heard much about that book, so I'll have to grab a copy of that.
Yeah, the funny thing is, folks write books all the time, but this one, and it's kind of been under the radar, but I just think it's such a great case study of navigating change through. This was at the financial crisis. So maybe there'll be one in a couple of years about somebody managing, through COVID and how they had to transform the business. But this was the last major upheaval we had, in the U.S. was the financial crisis, and this is literally kind of his approach and his playbook of how he helped lead the change to Starbucks and set some of the foundation of, having, in some cases, exceptional mobile platforms, right? He talked about this investment in 2012, right? And I think it was about 2 years ago, maybe it was a year ago, they were actually the second largest mobile transaction company in the world, right? They set that foundation 8 years ago, right? And I'm sure they saw it catch steam. But they also talk about, I'll just leave it on this, what they had to cut to make this happen, what they had to change. And so if you remember, Starbucks used to have a pretty sizable collection of like CDs and I think even DVDs. And there was they even created like their own label. And they had a wide variety of foods, or at least it's different than before. Howard came in and of course I'm oversimplifying it, but they had to cut the CDs. They had to cut staff, and he talks about that. And they had to cut the food, which was kind of crazy. They're like, hey, we're driving revenue. We want purchase value, transaction value at the point of register to increase. Food's a great thing for that. He goes, it is until it makes the coffee smell like garbage, right? You don't want coffee to smell like eggs. You don't want coffee to smell like bread. You want coffee to smell like coffee. So we got to nix the food. And he said forever. Obviously, he wasn't fully right about that. They brought back the sandwiches. And he talked about reversing his position later in the book, which was kind of interesting, right? So you don't get it right. It was the right premise. Cut the food. It's making coffee smell terrible. We don't want that. But it's like, okay, now let's bring back food that doesn't impact our ability to have aromatic coffee in our store. So anyways, I thought it was really fun. Even if you're not a Starbucks person, even if you're not a coffee person, heck, I don't even know how you feel about Howard Schultz, but this was a really good book.
Does he talk about the drive-through?
No, I don't think so.
Because it's interesting, and that's been a recent thing that I've noticed at the local Starbucks here is they've closed all the ones that didn't have a drive-through, and they've built new stores that have drive-throughs. And I am shocked. I'll go by there at 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon to go to the grocery store, which is next door, and there's a line around the Starbucks parking lot. People going in the drive-through drinking coffee at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. kind of baffles me that does so well.
Yeah, it's they look at the data and they say they look at consumer behavior, and they try to make the best decisions that still meet their brand as possible, right? So that's, data would indicate that they probably wanted food, breakfast sandwiches of all types, soups of all types, for example, in 08, 09. And that's what they did. Data would indicate that they could add, a million Starbucks left and right. They added too many. They didn't pick the right foods. They went fast. Their logistics and production engine was slowing down, so they weren't always having all their inventory. And so, you look at the data, you want to make good decisions, but you also want to make sure that they're right for, at the end of the day, like who you are as a company and what your core is. And so, but yeah, I was really surprised. I know they made that call, I think it was about a year ago, where they were going to actually decrease the square footage of their stores, make it more mobile order pickup centric. And which I thought, well, it certainly is a win for the consumer in the sense that it's more convenient to do mobile order. And I think they are so far ahead of the mobile order convenience space, and it baffles me how other companies haven't adopted mobile order in some way. And it's going to make them significantly more profitable if they have less square footage. Now, yeah. I would be really shocked. I mean, not to get into Starbucks weeds, if you will, but one of the things that he's talked about, and I've read both of his books about Starbucks at this point, oddly enough, that they were pretty passionate almost from day one about making Starbucks the third place. You have work, you have home, and you get to go to Starbucks. Ironically enough, Panera had the same perspective too. But so they've always thought about themselves as a third place. They want to have a feeling where you can kind of sit down and kind of enjoy this kind of treat, this luxury, this kind of nice aromatic coffee and all the other crazy drinks they sell. I don't know what else they sell. So even as they pare down the store, I'm really curious to see how they keep that third place concept in mind without feeling like they're going against maybe their one of their core premises of being a business. So we'll see how that plays out. But so far I'm still a fan of the business, and I think this book was just a tremendous documentation of a really challenging time period, and it's really rare for, I feel like, a business leader or business owner to write about a very specific 2 or 3 year snapshot and exactly how it went. It's usually like, here's my 70-year journey, here's everything that's gone. This is like, here's 2 years. It was very challenging. I'm going to try to give you the good, bad, and the ugly, and here's how it's laid out. So I thought it was a pretty cool read.
That's very cool. Well, David, let's wrap this up. Can you tell us the best way to follow you online or get in touch with you?
Yeah, jetpackworkflow.com. We have a little bubble in the bottom right. I'm sure we'll pop up and say, hey, hello, how can we help you? Jetpackworkflow.com, you can check out the software. We also have 32 spreadsheet templates. So if you just want to kind of get started in the world of documentation, of checklists, if you go to jetpackworkflow.com and go to the footer, we actually have a 32 template opt-in. So you can get 32 spreadsheets of different accounting, bookkeeping, payroll, and tax services that could start to get you on your journey of freeing yourself from your firm and documentation, starting to scale it up. We also have a copy of our digital book on the footer of the page. So we wrote this book called Double Your Accounting Firm, highlights some of the best practices we've learned on the podcast. Go to the footer of the site. That's also a free resource you can take advantage of.
Awesome. Well, thanks, David. Again, we could talk for a long time on these topics, and we never run out of things to talk about. So thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Accountant's Flight Plan podcast. If you like what you heard today, please follow us so that you can get updates when new episodes are released, and share our podcast with your friends and colleagues. You can also follow Poe Group Advisors on social media. Please visit our website for more information at poegroupadvisors.com.